want to begin, if I may, and once again we find ourselves trying to walk the tightrope. Stand by for the first partridgeism of the day. You have to walk a tightrope between facts and fun, right? Actually, that's more David Brent than Alan Partridge, I think. But I mean it. You do not want to turn your radio on and have a kind of endless intoning of all the calamities that we have largely inflicted upon ourselves and in some cases have fallen victim to through no fault of our own. However, neither can we do the ostrich, which seems increasingly popular in some corners of my industry. This is a year, you'll remember, in which rather than preparing for no-deal Brexit or properly addressing the rampaging virus, we have instead devoted hours of time and oodles of energy to the really important questions, like why can't we have an audience sing-along at an event with no audiences? Or how dare the National Trust plan to publish the history of a historic house in an actual historic house? And what's wrong with racist footballers booing Black Lives Matter and also cycle lanes and Meghan Markle? So all the big important issues, they've definitely picked all the right fights this year. July we could have extended, of course, the transition period. Smack in the middle of the current carnage, they had the opportunity to extend beyond December the 31st, what you might call the negotiating period, having campaigned on the ludicrous, fatuous, but temporarily effective slogan, "Get Brexit Done." Boris Johnson had boxed himself into a corner that he couldn't get out of. And that is why we are where we are. France has shut its borders, or controlled them, as you might prefer to say. And albeit that people like you and me can respond to that with a degree of unhappiness, we have to remind ourselves that people unlike you and me a week ago were cheering the prospect of gunboats being deployed in the English Channel to corral French fishermen. How dare the French treat us? And say what you like about our Vote Leave government, the effort that they have put in over the last few years to really cultivating and nurturing our relations with foreign powers, with our closest allies, both geographically and diplomatically. The real effort and energy that they have dedicated to portraying post-Brexit Britain as a country that is open to the world and its wife, quite possibly. I mean, imagine what a mess we'd be in if we'd spent 4 years indulging in a jingoistic psychodrama built entirely upon a completely bogus notion of sovereignty and a fetishization of fish. Yeah, well done, everybody. So I've fallen off the tightrope already. I've gone all in on the facts and we haven't had any fun yet. I don't know where the fun will come from, but we usually manage to unearth a nugget or two in the course of our contemplations in the morning. Dominic Raab is currently Foreign Secretary. Dominic Raab said in 2018, while he was serving as Secretary of State for Brexit, he said he'd been taken by surprise by how much we relied upon the Dover-Calais crossing when it comes to imports and exports. And I know that this show is a daily dedication to Groundhog Day. All that's missing is I Got You, Babe. However, and Bill Murray. However, and the what's it called? Meerkat. What's it called? Groundhog. Oh, yeah, well done, Keith. You've earned your money already today. No, it's got a name. It's like Pickatawny Pete or something like that. It's not just looking for the species, you clown. There we go, 7 minutes after 10. We've done the facts. Here comes the fun, courtesy of Keith, the funmonger. But the point is, of course, that it is one of those moments where I say to you, I honestly thought that more people might open their eyes at that point. When the Secretary of State for Brexit revealed that he didn't know the importance of the Dover-Calais crossing, but remained convinced that Brexit was a good idea, I did think, because there was still a chance of getting a second referendum over the line at that point in proceedings, and naive little fellow that I am, the little Lord Fauntleroy, crossed with Cassandra of British political commentary, I honestly thought, that's Cassandra from Greek mythology, Keith, not Only Fools and Horses, thank you. I honestly thought that when Dominic Raab came out with something of such unutterable imbecility that many people who had still kind of clung on to the carcass of this national notion being a good idea would finally be able to prise their fingers off it and think, well, hang on a minute, he's Secretary of State for Brexit and he's only just realised the importance of the Dover-Calais crossing. Maybe this isn't such a great idea after all, lads. But no, he got promoted and is now Foreign Secretary. So the qualification that you need to hold the greatest office in the land in the context of foreign relations, except Prime Minister, is to not appreciate the importance of the most important crossing that our country has. Well, they'll be appreciating it today, I think. They'll be appreciating it today because belatedly, I think, and he's definitely muffed up Christmas, although every time I try to say something positive about this shower, I end up getting a kicking from you for being too nice to the government, which is a refreshing change from getting kickings from racists for telling the truth about the government. But I do try to just grasp a glimmer of upbeatery, if that's even a word. And it would be that this time, I think, I know some people are saying, hang on, we knew about it on Wednesday. You cannot know that a new strain, you cannot know how virulent it is until it's had the chance to take root in a population. So the first time it's detected, you haven't got a clue at that point how quickly it might spread or how transmittable it is. You need, I think, 4 or 5 weeks to compare a new strain's virulence, which simply means its transmissibility, to the other strain. So I'm not at this point, and I'm always, as ever on the programme, open to persuasion, but I'm not at this point minded to give them a kicking for going late on the new virus strain. I might change my mind on that, but obviously he should have. The Christmas thing was an absolute. How many times did we say last week it's crackers? The Christmas plans are crackers. It's quite a nice turn of phrase, but it masks, of course, a deep and obvious truth. The Christmas thing was nuts from the start, and now, of course, and this is what I meant at the outset when I said we're all on the same sea, but we are all in different boats. Because I think the people we should probably note first this morning, the people whose Christmases have been truly turned upside down to the extent that they will unexpectedly be on their own on the big day. I feel nothing but sympathy for you. Nothing but sympathy at all. I mean, I don't know what we can do. The radio will keep you company. Steve Allen will be here on the big day, but it is an almost unbelievable reversal of expectation, isn't it? Even if you're only going to be 2 of you together, or you know, if it was only going to be a curtailed Christmas, it's now essentially been wiped out for some people, and I think that will be the recurring thing. We've got 15 hours together before I break up on Wednesday, and I think a recurring theme will be we're all in very different boats. Talking of boats, the situation in Dover is about as dire as I can ever remember it being, but I am not a great watcher of Dover. I mean, I was aware of the importance of the Dover-Calais crossing to our international trade, unlike our Foreign Secretary, but I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, an expert. And that's why I think we'll begin today with a very simple what's going on. So in the direct context of freight, transport, and that channel crossing, let's call that the rock, okay? That is the rock that's been lobbed into the pool this morning, last night. How do the ripples reach you? So if you're stuck in your cab on the M20 at the moment, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What do you think is going to happen? What messages are you receiving? What would you like to see happen? There was an awful piece on Vice, the Vice website last week, about a 77-year-old man in Kent whose sort of the bottom of his garden had become almost like a sort of sewer. So many 2-litre bottles full of urine were being thrown out of lorry cabs by drivers stuck. And I don't know. I mean, you could keep your bottle in your cab, I suppose, until you find somewhere a little bit more sanitary to dispose of it. But you can't, you know, tie a proverbial knot in it, can you? They've got to go somewhere. Even I thought they were exaggerating when they talked about having to install portaloos up and down the motorways. But if you're there, if you're hit there, give me a call, 0345 6060 973. How, 9 hours we've got, sorry. You're absolutely right, Pinky. We've got 9 hours together. I break up on Wednesday. I'm not going to do a 5-hour show unless Sheila gets stuck. somewhere, and I have to stay on there. So we've got 9 hours together, and that line about thingamy, the line about all being in different boats on the same sea will be a recurring theme for those 9 hours. But the question I think we'll start with today is the question of transport and France. I think there's probably a case for arguing that because Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson had to really stress the seriousness of the new strain, I'm not qualified to comment on whether or not the reaction to it has been excessive or extreme. I'm not confident that they have done anything wrong in warning us about how bad this is. I've seen the suggestion that it's all been deliberately ramped up to distract or give them a scapegoat for when the impact of Brexit kicks in. Once again, you're giving them too much credit. Have a look at them now and tell me there's a master plan. Have a look at Dominic Cummings scurrying away and then driving to Durham while infected, which is, of course, what any responsible father would do, according to Matt Hancock, who then described the scenes at St Pancras and King's Cross on Friday as disgraceful or disgusting. But surely those people desperate to get out of London were just doing what any responsible father would do, or mother, or cousin, or sister, or brother, or grandma, or granddaughter, or grandson, or cousin, or friend, or family member. No, surely if any responsible father would bomb all the way up to Durham with his kid in the back of the car and his infected wife in the passenger seat, then any responsible child would do their level best to get on a crowded petri dish of a train out of London, heading north where the incidence of the new strain is still quite low. That's right, isn't it, Matt? Or are you just a massive hypocrite who changes what he says depending on what day of the week it is? I'll let the listeners decide. 10:15 is the time. The roads. I mean, how bad is this? And obviously, the answer to that in the first instance is bad, and this is where it's going to be very tough for those of us who are now about to spend the next 5 years being proved horribly and unforgivably right about everything. It will get better. When it gets better, it doesn't mean that you haven't made a terrible disaster and inflicted economic sanctions on your own country for the first time in human history, but it is very, very important. No triumphalism, a tiny little bit of I told you so, because otherwise you might not listen to us next time we warn you about putting people like Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings in charge of an entire country. But no triumphalism, we all get hit hard. And any alleviation, any relief, this is the bit I find hardest to understand as COVID and Brexit collide in spectacular fashion. The idea that you think that people who kind of knew this was on the horizon, even without the pandemic making everything infinitely worse, you kind of think we're going to be pleased about the fact that our shops struggle too. You kind of think we're going to be pleased about the fact that half of Kent is a car park, or that some poor fella who voted for Brexit has ended up having an ocean of urine at the bottom of his garden. There is no pleasure in this. If there's schadenfreude at all, it's the thinnest of gruel. It really is. But of course, if you see the world in such a bovine, binary, tribal, football-y way, you presume that the other side, because you can only think in terms of sides, you presume that they're as shallow and as stupid as you are. But we're not, I promise you. Nobody takes pleasure in hurting themselves. The problem is, of course, that when 52% of the country decided to smack itself in the face with a frying pan back in 2016, it would end up hitting 100% of the country. Anybody who is insulated from it is insulated by dint of having dual citizenship and a few quid in the bank. Funny that, isn't it, given that Brexit was supposed to be a great working-class crusade. Oh, and those new blue passports you've got? Yeah, that gives you freedom of movement between two countries, the UK and Ireland. Johnny Foreigner, over in the European Union, his burgundy passport gives him freedom of movement between just over 30. And the reason why people still can't acknowledge the uselessness of Boris Johnson is because it would entail acknowledging the madness of Brexit. You unravel it if you can. But let's begin with the roads, the crossings, the borders, the ports. And my favourite question to you, what's going on? 03456060973. And what does the end of the tunnel, if you pardon the pun, what does the end of the tunnel look like? France have to reopen their borders, surely. Don't they? Or should they continue to exercise a sort of sovereignty that looks a little bit selfish from the other side of the channel? Thank God we'd never indulge in that kind of behaviour. Obviously, to put things in context, you think you've got problems. I've got 3 Fortnum and Mason hampers that I've got to get back to Chiswick after the show today. So please, spare a thought for those of us who are really struggling, the crosses that we have to bear. And thank you to everybody who sent me a lovely present this year. It's been quite a remarkable haul, actually, although I don't know that is necessarily the most important thing unfolding in the newsroom at the minute. Kieran is in Romford. Is that the Kieran?
That's me. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Now, can I big you up a bit? Do you mind? Because we've got way more listeners now, even than we did when you first started ringing in. So Kieran, Kieran is, well, I mean, he somewhat modestly describes himself as a van driver. He's actually an international courier and facilitator, and he introduced you as listeners to this program and me to, and I may get some of the terminology wrong, but to things like carnets. Is it? Carnets and sundry other nuggets of knowledge that you would have if you had ever sought to make deliveries across borders, whether within or without the European Union. And he introduced us to the reality of what it would be like to be what is known as a third country, which we become at midnight on New Year's Eve. And that point is the point at which moving from the UK into, for example, France could become as complicated as moving from Poland into, for example, Ukraine. And he has been proven, I think, even more right than me about everything. Is that a fair comment, Kieran?
Yeah, you described the Poland-Ukraine border, which regularly takes 24, 36, 48 hours to cross over. Same as the Terahova border in Latvia into Russia. There was queues this month of 50 hours.
50 hours?
50 hours with 600 trucks. So if you figure 6,000 in and out of Dover, with a ferry crossing there on land, you only have to imagine what it's going to be like in the customs formalities. So...
But and this isn't... I mean, what worries me about this is we still don't know whether there's going to be a deal. I suspect it's less likely now than it was on Friday. But even I work on the presumption that, well, we'll muddle through and then things will get better. But what you're describing is a sort of permanence on the crossings between European Union countries and non-European Union countries. Did you think, Kieran, that there was possibly some sort of third way? Because I think I was susceptible to the idea that because we'd been members for so long, we wouldn't be exactly the same as a country that had no previous membership or relationship with the European Union. So where are you now?
I think it's very easy to talk about what a border may look like, but you can never envisage it until it actually happens. Yeah. Obviously, if you had an arrangement sort of like the Swiss do or the Norwegians do, don't forget their traffic flows are much, much lower than what the UK's are through the ports, and they're also overland. You still have lengthy queues going into Basel most mornings of 10 to 15 kilometres of trucks trying to get into the car parks. Same with Norway. If you go to Sveinsland up from Sweden, I've had friends stuck there with pharmaceuticals that have been there for 12, 14, 15 hours that they regularly posted on Facebook. There's a problem with their paperwork. So they're one of the easier borders to navigate, if you like. Once you get into a third country border, obviously I wouldn't honestly know what it's like to cross. I mean, Turkey still has an arrangement of a customs union with the European Union, but no freedom of movement, and they've got massive queues on their borders, just like the Ukraine has an arrangement with the European Union. The borders are huge. You just got to look to Russia and Latvia and the external periphery of these borders into the European Union to see how bad they are. I think what's happening at the moment, nobody foresaw it, that the commercial traffic would be shut. I thought even it would be open.
How long do you think it will stay shut for? And to be clear, I don't think, I mean, there may be some diplomacy involved, some sabre rattling. Obviously, announcing that we were going to send gunboats into the English Channel last week could now be construed as a slightly silly thing to have done to our French allies. But the closure of the ports, I don't think is Brexity, is it? It's pure coronavirus. What do you...
Look, if you look at what happened in Belarus, they more or less shut the border with Lithuania. Yeah. It all comes down to your relations with your closest neighbours.
Yes.
Well, as you say, when you threaten to send in gunboats to monitor French fishermen, there's going to be a retaliative measure.
Worse than that, really, isn't it? We spent 5 years insulting all of our European friends and neighbours.
Look. I went out on Thursday night. It took me 10 hours to cross. I don't know if you saw the video I put on Twitter.
Yeah, I did, mate.
I sat there. I had an hour and a half sleep. I was late for my delivery into Paris. I didn't make my delivery into Heathrow on the way back. It failed, and this is exactly what I said would happen through no fault of your own. You may get over.
Yeah.
You may get to do your deliveries. You will not meet the time constraints that many companies require their goods to move backwards and forwards, i.e. production lines, cars,
just-in-time manufacturing,
aerospace. Comes off a van onto a production line. It will fail.
Now, I should remind listeners, this is all what used to be known as Project Fear.
Absolutely. Look, I'm going to Poland. I've got a job. I'm loading on Wednesday. I've taken no chances. I've managed to get a ferry out from Harwich to the Hook of Holland. It's far from ideal. It's a 7-8 hour crossing. I've got to be in Poland on the 29th. I'll be in Calais on the 31st. I'm coming back empty. I'm not coming back with commercial goods, because if there is no deal with those customs, I'll be honest, I have an agent. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And this all comes down to how prepared are you?
Yeah.
I've been prepared for 4 years. I've always had a customs agent. I know what the formalities are. You don't know what the formalities are going to be in Calais coming into Dover. You just do not know. You cannot prepare for this. So I'm witnessing firsthand what's happening. I was lucky to get a client's goods out of the UK, which I must add was an entire collection of incredibly expensive goods that they're clearing out of the UK. This is what's happening. People are leaving en masse with goods before Brexit Day. And it's what I'm taking out to Poland. I'm taking it out before customs formalities come in. They even asked me, what will it be like in January? I said, I do not know. I couldn't give an answer. So it's got to get out beforehand. So, I might get out. I might get back in. I don't know what's going to happen. But what's happening at the moment with all the truck drivers parked up on the M20, no toilets, no food, no sanitary conditions, and they're all sitting there for a minimum of 2 days. And what I think may happen, James...
2 days?
Well, they're going to be there for 2 days, for 48 hours, right? Because the commercial traffic has completely been shut, apart from if you send your trailer over
and then
unaccompanied.
No, I understand. And just in conclusion, you can't wash your face long-term commercially if you're coming back without a load, can you, if I understand your industry? The reason...
No. Most people charge one way, otherwise it becomes uncompetitive, or you have an arrangement with other people to bring goods in from Europe, so you load out one way, load back the other. If you start charging double, triple rates to get out, it makes you uncompetitive. It makes the people sending goods out the UK to Europe uncompetitive, because the transport costs will increase 2 or 3-fold. So, for instance, if you charge £1,000 to send goods out to Paris, and it takes you 8 hours with the freedom of movement of goods and yourself and capital and everything. If it takes 2 or 3 days to get out and to get back in, you're looking at maybe 4 or 5 days to do a Paris.
COVID has made everything worse. So when I credit you with having called all of this and predicted all of this, it's with the constant caveat that coronavirus makes everything worse than it would have been, worse than it needed to be. But that said, the whole point of leadership is to be prepared for all manner of calamities. What, right now, Kieran, what's the best horizon you can imagine?
I think, if we're lucky, the French may open the border, but you may well require a private COVID test before you can get on a ferry, which is not very easy for all the truck drivers stuck down in Kent. You can't just get people coming en masse to do a private COVID test and give you a QR code onto your phone. And you can imagine what sort of delays that's going to create if they do it at the ports. It's not a case of just taking your temperature anymore. They did it when I went to Spain. On the ferry, they took the temperature before I got off the boat.
Right. And we never really got our head around that. Well, you keep in touch, won't you? Because I know, I can tell that you've got your feet up today, because we've been struggling to get you on the show over the last few days. Every time we talked to you...
I had a manic week last week.
I know you did. Every time we got hold of you, you were stuck in a queue here or loading up there. And I think at one point you were locked in your cab having a bit of a ding-dong with one of your customers because tempers are going to be running very short. I mean... You know me, Kieran. I'm desperate to ask you if there's anything that could be described as a glimmer of hope and positivity. But, of course, when I ask you that question, if the answer's negative, there's always the danger that I've ended up making things even worse than they were before I asked you in the first place. But let me ask you, any glimmers of hope or positivity?
I put on Twitter last night, does this lockdown feel much more depressing than last? And I actually posted that before the French closed the border. Yeah. And I think this is the most depressing one, because everything's literally locked into an island on the periphery of Europe as a third country in the cold with no help. And you've got Brexit coming. 4 years, and we still don't know what it's going to look like. And we've got a matter of days. I think it's an absolute disgrace.
Well,
and it's all of their making. All of it is of their making. I'm sorry. You're going out. You're coming into a crisis right at the moment because of COVID and the queues and no commercial traffic flows through any of the ports apart from the Netherlands. That may change. I booked a ticket, as I say, to the Hook of Holland. Yeah. That may change. I don't know. I've taken the risk and bought the ticket. But you've got that, and then you've got the threat of a no deal, and they claim it's all going to be great, and we're going to thrive.
There's thrive either way is the phrase du jour. We're going to thrive whatever happens, which is, shall we say, optimistic. Kieran, mate, you look after yourself. We will speak again sooner probably rather than later. And Kieran, affectionately known as the van driver, has been shown to be right about everything, which is only partly a compliment. It's also a statement of the bleeding obvious, because he does this sort of stuff for a living. And I'm fairly confident that John Redwood doesn't. It's my problem. It's my job to walk this tightrope between facts, fun and feelings. But I'm afraid if you're expecting me to stop pointing out who's responsible for the national calamity that we find ourselves in, then you are listening to the wrong radio station. And if you're still there, still chomping away at the idea that Nigel Farage was a go-to geezer and had a deeper understanding of international relations than Mark Carney and Pascal Lamy, then I will be here for you when you fall. I will catch you when you fall, okay? There will be no gloating, there will be no triumphalism. There will simply be, as there has been since before the referendum even started, there will simply be an honest attempt to get the facts in front of you. And that's why callers like Kieran were so resonant back in the day. A lot of love coming in for him again. But Project Fear was the phrase on everybody's lips when Kieran was describing to us what is now happening. And we barely scratched the surface. So everybody, 0345 60 60973, everybody, welcome to join in. But I do want to talk about impacts, I think, impacts of where we are now, with, of course, the crossing of the fingers for where we will be next. Robert Shrimsley of the FT sums up best what is, I think, an important part of our contemplations at the moment. He writes, before you opt for conspiracy, it's always best to eliminate incompetence. So while I bow to few people in my understanding of the absurdity of having people like Dominic Raab, Boris Johnson, Priti Patel and Liz Truss in charge of our country, there is no earthly way that they've embarked upon some sinister master plan to use the new strain of the coronavirus to mask the impacts of leaving the European Union without a deal. It just doesn't hold water, all right? And although I can't prove it to you, if I've earned your trust by dint of the last 4.5 years of unerring accuracy and prediction, then I'd ask you to extend it to me on this one. They have not done this or exaggerated this in order to dilute the Brexit-related impacts that are on the horizon as well. 10:39. Keith is in Folkestone. Keith, what can you tell us?
Oh, well, I'm just a bit still amazed that Kent was one of the major Brexit, one of the major Leave counties.
Yeah.
I live in Folkestone, and we are one of the few places in the country where you can see Europe.
Oh, gosh. That's a lovely way of putting it, isn't it?
Well, it is, because on a clear day, you can see the cliffs of France.
Yes.
But we've always had, I guess, there's always been a sort of slight problem with the immigration thing, sadly. And even that has still put everything above and beyond the fact that we have both the physical and the shipping connection to Europe.
Yes.
And an awful lot of jobs around here rely on that. We've had, in the past, Operation Stack many times, so the motorways have been turned into car parks. This isn't something new for the residents.
Isn't it amazing that no one ever joined the dots on that? I mean, while the Farages of this world were spreading their xenophobic lies up and down the country, nobody even said that, OK, even if you pretend he's telling the truth, you could balance it out with what you've just described. You see, so you can't have one without the other. Freedom of movement of goods entails freedom of movement of people. But even now, Christmas 2020, there's a hell of a lot of people for whom that penny has still not dropped.
Yeah, but it's also sort of compounding, because we now have a sort of a holding camp, because it is an army camp, for the people that are making the crossing in the small boats across the channel. We didn't have that at the time of the referendum.
No. And people will be pointing
and so all it's doing is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, I mean, it's there as a distraction.
In many respects, as far as the local feeling is concerned. And so, you know, you add that to it, and there will be, because unfortunately in this part of the country, one of the reasons that Operation Stack has happened in the past, it's not always, but one of the reasons has been, you know, French fishermen blockading Calais Harbour.
Yeah.
And so, again, you know, people are used to Operation Stack and Operation Brock happening here, and if the government or the right-wing press start sort of pointing the finger at France, because they're the ones that closed the border. Again, it's just compounded.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, Farage is trending, I've just noticed, because he's complaining about France controlling their borders. So, I mean, the irony is
which is what you wanted, which we you know, this is what Brexit was all about.
Controlling our borders. But no, not like that. Not their borders. Sovereignty means we get to do whatever we want, and everybody else also gets to do whatever we want. But again, as I say that, so you're in the sector, I think, you're in the maritime sector
so
up to a point.
I work in maritime training. I mean, basically, I make films about the shipping industry.
Oh, okay.
And it's all the technical stuff. It's everything from the mental health and well-being. We make films about that sort of thing, to everything about, you know, how not to blow up your oil tanker, or how to refuel a ship, or how to look after an engine, the electrical systems, everything. And, so it's the whole raft, cargo handling, across all sectors. The
sector will survive. Of course it will. I mean, you know, we can't...
Shipping, I'll just like to make a point about that.
Yeah, if you would. It'd be the final point.
Shipping is very flexible.
Right, exactly.
And we, as a country, you know, a lot of people, you'll hear people saying, oh, you know, there isn't a British shipping industry, but there actually is. And an awful lot of it's based in the City of London. I know there was a report I think about last week or something, I saw a Reuters report, very brief, flashed up saying that the government are going to invest a lot more in British shipping, or to attract the shipping industry back to the City of London. So when you talk about shipping industry in the City of London, you're talking about like Lloyd's, that kind of thing. And a lot of the international organisations are based in London, and the IMO, that's the International Maritime Organisation, the UN body, is based in London. So London, the UK, actually are quite an important part of the global shipping business. And it's a very flexible industry, because it has to be. Okay,
and that's what I mean. It will survive. In what form, we do not know yet. But again, you know, even with a referendum, we can't actually vote to leave the 21st century, and that's about the closest we get to a crumb of comfort at the moment. Keith, many thanks. Great name. Coming up to 11:15, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. What's going on where you are? 0345 60973. And if you want to send me your favourite fast forward 4 years, I'll read them all out on the programme. Shall we begin with John Redwood today? So, John Redwood, 17th of July 2016. Getting out of the EU can be quick and easy. The UK holds most of the cards. John Redwood, 21st of December 2020. Time to use the lorry parks we have built. We rely on imports too much. Let's grow and make more at home. Might be a slightly short timescale, that, Johnny boy, in order to get in place for Christmas. I've got some experts to talk to you today. We're going to talk to a trade expert about what is going on in the context of trade negotiations. It was back in July, of course, that the UK took the unilateral sovereign decision to eschew the chance to even theoretically extend negotiations, which means the clock is now ticking very loudly. And we'll also speak to the top man at the Road Haulage Association about the cold, hard realities that his members and other members of that sector are currently facing, because France is closed for business. It's closed for everything. And although, I mean, for heaven's sake, nobody knows better than I do how easy it will be for some people who are not necessarily dishonest, they're just a bit intellectually lazy, and they're so entrenched in tabloid warfare that they genuinely don't understand that the world can be different. So who can we blame? Who can I get you to attack today? Even as we see the scenes that we're seeing in Kent, instead of thinking maybe it's the people that we helped put in charge that are responsible for what's happening in this country, there will still be people in my profession urging you to blame Emmanuel Macron, or to blame Meghan Markle, or to have a crack at the BBC or the National Trust. What were you doing back in December? Cheerleading for Boris Johnson. How do you think the country's doing right now? It's an absolute skip fire. Does Boris Johnson bear any responsibility for that, or even, God forbid, his cheerleaders? No, absolutely not. I can't possibly acknowledge any failings or frailties on the part of Boris Johnson, because then I'd have to contemplate the possibility that the biggest con he ever sold in his entire pitiful life is also going to be disastrous for the United Kingdom. And that is what happens at midnight on December the 31st. But attempts to blame Emmanuel Macron. Do you want to run through some of the countries that are also closed to the UK? Norway, India, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Morocco, Turkey, Denmark, Finland, El Salvador, Israel, Italy, Bulgaria, Austria, Belgium, Netherlands. I mean, France, by dint of having that, we've got a land border, I suppose, if you include the tunnel. Germany and Ireland. Ireland have just set up a helpline for the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland have just set up a helpline to assist their residents and citizens who are stuck in the UK. 10:51 is the time. But don't forget, I mean, this might sound bad, but hey, we've still something fish, something blue passport, something. Stephen's in Shepperton. Stephen, what can you tell us?
I'm an insulin-dependent diabetic.
Right.
And I have got, every single piece of medication that I rely on to keep me alive is manufactured in continental Europe. None of it's manufactured here.
Right.
I'm thinking that a cock-up similar to this might happen.
Yeah.
I happen to have, as it were, a full box of insulin pens in stock for emergencies, but that will last me about a week. And I'm still waiting for my last prescription request for insulin to be fulfilled. And that was over a week ago when I put that in.
And what reason do they give you for the delay? Because it might be...
I don't get any... You just wait until the prescription is filled.
How long does it usually take?
4 days.
Okay. So it's doubled what it would usually take, which, I know you're going to be nervous about this, but that's not an emergency.
No, I know. But you just have to there are going to be a lot of people who are kind of in this position of being, either insulin-dependent diabetics or some other medical condition where drugs they depend on are not manufactured in this country. They are manufactured in continental Europe.
Yes, of course. And
to a quite surprising extent, actually. I hadn't realised until I started scooting through the boxes of stuff that I've got.
Reading the small print.
Yes, Czechoslovakia or Hungary.
Well, the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine is being produced in Belgium, isn't it? So obviously they have the infrastructure, the manufacturing infrastructure, and I'm sure, as you are as well, that this will all work itself out, even if it ends up costing a little more, or if the supply changes slightly. But it's the lack of certainty, I presume, that's most dispiriting.
It's the lack of certainty, and also the utter stupidity of the people who aren't really conducting the negotiations, who, they just want it all to disappear in a great fireball so they can flounce out and say, oh, look, we've been forced into a no deal.
Which would have been a bad state of affairs pre-coronavirus, but mid-coronavirus is almost beyond parody, isn't it? Kevin thinks you should show some respect Stephen. He says, who would you put in charge? Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister is our democratically elected leader with an 80-seat majority. Have some respect, says Kevin. For Boris Johnson, presumably.
Some respect for Boris Johnson. Yes. Well, I'll try hard.
Yes, good. Let me know how you get on. Let me know how you get on.
I will. Okay.
And I hope, I mean, if there's anything that may be eased by a little bit of media belly aching, then do let me know, Stephen, and I'll do what I can, although I sense as I say that I wouldn't know where to start. I'm always happy to swing a sword or two on behalf of my listeners, but I need a target. 10:55 is the time. Phone lines are open, 2 free. You can grab the one Stephen's just vacated, 0345 6060 973. How is this affecting you? I'd also quite like to know what the supermarkets are like, because, you know, it's in our headlines now. Quite rightly, because we've got to give you the information you need to make an informed decision. Although, obviously, in the context of Brexit, I'd finish telling you what was happening in the supermarkets, and then you could change the station and hear somebody else telling you that's not true at all. You just need to believe in the absence of queues. You just need to believe in bog roll, and then it will miraculously appear on the shelves in front of you, just as believing in Brexit has obviously protected us from any of the potential problems that were described by everybody from the Governor of the Bank of England to Kieran the van driver, who was on the programme a moment ago. But it is now being reported, Sainsbury's have warned that they will start to see gaps over the coming days on lettuce, on some salad leaves, cauliflowers, broccoli and citrus fruit, which, you know, obviously we can survive. Fray Bentos tinned pies seem to me to be due a comeback, and I may be eating the biscuits in my 3 Fortnum and Mason hampers that arrived this morning, more for sustenance than for pleasure. But, you know, we are where we are. So what is going on? 0345 6060 973. And listen, I probably won't read out the angry text so much today. I read out Kevin's because I think it was funny. Have some respect. Jog on, pal. You respect achievements, you respect attributes, you respect gifts, you respect efforts, you respect behaviours. You don't respect people just because they've got plums in their mouth and a ruffled hair. If we'd learnt that lesson a few years ago, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in now. Believe in bog roll, Kevin. Believe in bog roll. And I'm not going to read them out because I feel so sorry for you all. And you can take it out on me. That's fine if it helps. If it's therapeutic to send an abusive message to me for being right and for making you feel silly, and you're not quite ready yet to admit it, that's fine. But I'm not going to read them out because I think it'll make things worse for you. So I've already had someone accusing the last caller of lying. So I think it will make things worse for you if I read it out. Because at the moment, all you're really processing is guilt and shame, which you're not quite ready to acknowledge. But it's a private process, that. And me reading out your vile messages on the radio will make your guilt and shame more public. And I think that will hurt more than just quietly stewing at the moment in your own bile. But when you're ready to climb down from that place that Nigel took you, we will be here to catch you, okay? Nigel and Boris and good old John Redwood and Jacob Rees-Mogg. Common sense, of course, is what... I can't even go there today. 10:58 is the time. Akhtar is in Birmingham. Akhtar, what's going on?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd give you a call. I've always listened to your show, and I think the biggest thing right now, I think a lot of people are going to start to realise is food is integral to everyone.
I think people already realise that, Akhtar, to be fair.
But, you know, for us, you know, I'm in the hospitality industry, so we were told at the start of December by a lot of our suppliers not to even bother writing menus for January because they won't know what will be available, what cost will be, for example, and even down to simple things like, I know you mentioned earlier on with cauliflower and broccoli. Yes. So staple items like that, which we, I guess, took for granted that we'd always have access to, we're now being told.
Yeah, but I mean, you couldn't have been told that back in September, I don't think.
No, in December, start of December.
Yeah, because but France shutting the borders has caused the Sainsbury's announcement today, I think. I mean, I know come December the 31st, we don't know yet what the situation will be regarding tariffs and customs checks. So, look, you've put me in a very difficult situation. I'm now trying to sort of turn down the
thing is,
tension.
James, this is what we've been told by the industry that supplies us. So
I know.
The wholesale industry, that I guess they're doing their due diligence and making sure that we, as their customers, are made aware.
Forewarned is forearmed, but a warning, and this, of course, was the big failure of so-called Project Fear, warning that something might happen is not a prediction. It's just giving you information that you need to prepare.
But this is a situation that we, I guess, shouldn't have had to deal with because we knew Brexit is coming. So maybe I know there's a lot of conversation about we need to be more self-sufficient. So maybe the infrastructure should have been put in place for us to be more self-sufficient.
What sort of restaurant have you got, Akhtar, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I've got a small group of restaurants, but one of them being a Michelin-starred restaurant
in Birmingham.
In Birmingham, that's correct. Yeah.
Are you Akhtar Islam?
I am, yeah.
So you're the proprietor of... How do I pronounce it? Is it Opim or Ofim?
Ofim.
Ofim. It's on my list. I promised to take my mum there. My mum lives in Kidderminster, so we'll see you on the other side when we get out of all this. But that's the point, isn't it? So it's from the vegetable aisle in Sainsbury's to a Michelin-starred restaurant in Birmingham. I mean, everybody is feeling or is going to be feeling the pinch in the coming days. What's the best-case scenario for you?
Well, best-case scenario for us is that we manage to get a sensible deal, which means we can continue with some semblance of normality moving forward. I think, we need to, with everything that's happened this year, I think 2021, we need to find a way of trying to bring life back to the normality that we all enjoy.
Once the vaccine is out there, we're going to need to sort of vaccinate trade in some way. But of course, Johnson has boxed himself into a corner where the people that he is most enthralled to are arguably the people most ignorant about the no deal they think they want entailing. Akhtar, many thanks indeed. I will I will get to your restaurant one day. We will endeavour to speak to the people who are living the stories, living the issues under discussion. I probably was a little late in realising the dangers of giving equal airtime to people possessed of entirely fact-free but especially pungent opinions. And I do feel a bit bad about that. But hey, we are where we are. Richard Burnett is the Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association and no doubt a very busy man this morning. So first off, thank you for your time, Richard. I'm not entirely sure where to start. If I'd set off on Saturday to make a delivery to continental Europe and I'd ended up in the tailback at Dover, what would I be looking at over the next few days, do you think?
Well, if you've come from Europe into the UK, is that your question, James?
No, if I'm in a lorry now in Kent, what does the immediate future look like?
Well, I mean, if you're a lorry in Kent, you're going to be stuck there for at least 48 hours as it stands at the moment. I know there's some rumour that's sort of filtering around to say that we might find a resolution to this really quickly. But at the moment, if you're stuck in that queue for 48 hours, it's going to be pretty miserable. Government were working towards, resolving truck parking and putting facilities in place. But those plans were for January, not for now. They're having to bring those plans forward. And, at the moment, they're actually rolling out additional truck parking spaces, potentially in Manston for 4,000 trucks. On the M20, there's potentially going to be 2,000 trucks. And I guess our concern is about facilities, driver welfare, hot food, sufficient elements for those drivers while they're waiting if they're stuck there for 2 days. That's going to be a significant issue for them.
And I mean, crikey, I don't think I've ever felt less Christmassy on the 21st of December, but it seems to me as an amateur that the next problem will be the fact that if I was a French or a Lithuanian or a Belgian truck driver with a load that is destined for the UK, the last thing I'd want to do is drive here because I've got no idea whether I'll ever get out again.
James, that's exactly the problem that we're facing at the moment. They don't want to be stranded here before Christmas. If they come into the UK today, then they're going to have to join this queue, over the next sort of 48 hours. So what we're hearing more and more at the moment is a lot of EU drivers and hauliers from Europe are refusing to come to the UK, don't want to come to the UK. And that's going to create a challenge for us if they don't come. We may well see a shortage of fresh produce. We've seen a lot of stock building already for ambient product for transition. So I think the retailers are well stocked with ambient product, but that short shelf life chilled product, is likely to be, under pressure getting that into the UK.
And probably would have been anyway, come January the 1st, in the absence of a negotiated settlement. But coronavirus is like the mother of all magnifying glasses, really, isn't it?
Well, look, it definitely is. And I think whether we have a deal or not, there is still going to be significant challenges in terms of, both inbound product from Europe, but UK exports, because of the declarations that we're going to have to complete, the paperwork that we're going to have to complete, and the fact that businesses both in the UK and Europe simply aren't ready for this transitional process that we're going to go through. So lots of challenges, but this week is probably not what any of us expected in terms of this kind of issue.
I don't know where you are comfortable treading, but I'll ask you don't have to answer it. Do you feel the French are acting unreasonably within the context of us threatening to stick gunboats in the English Channel just one short week ago?
Well, look, I think we're in the middle of a negotiation.
Yes.
We're also trying to, I guess, stop the spread of a new, I guess, mutated virus. The COVID strain that's taking hold. It's moving pretty rapidly. But what I would say, James, is that we've done a really good job over the last 9-10 months of actually keeping critical freight moving. Drivers, are remote by the very nature of the fact that they're sitting in their cabs. They're socially distanced when they tip and reload, and we've managed that really successfully. So. I would put into question the timing of this. Bearing in mind, there's also been reports that this strand has been around certainly since September, possibly even earlier. In which case the timing of this, like I said, does come into question.
You spoke to Grant Shapps last night, I think. Did you raise that point with him, the timing question?
Well, I guess it's something that I've kind of raised with government over the last sort of 12, 15 hours as we've been having constant conversations. I'm not saying that there is any response that would come back from that, but I think we've been so heavily involved in these kind of negotiations and conversations around what is happening. It would be wrong to think that at the moment talks are not breaking through, are they? We're getting ever closer to the year end when transition has to happen. And this is probably no better way of actually putting pressure on and demonstrating the true impact of what may happen. And it also demonstrates that perhaps we're not in control of our borders in the way in which we think we are.
God forbid. Richard Burnett, the Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association, many thanks for your time. And I don't know if I've ever ended an interview by saying good luck, but I'm going to. Good luck. 10 minutes after 11 is the time. 0345 60 60973 is the number you need. I don't think any of us would file this under good news as such, but it's better news than where we were. I'm just looking at the Twitter feed of a diabetes consultant in the NHS. And the message is that all insulin companies have been contacted and have confirmed adequate stock for forthcoming months. So Stephen's delay to his prescription is hopefully just a bureaucratic rather than a supply issue. Please don't stockpile. Follow the usual route of acquiring meds. Thank you. And I've retweeted that from my Twitter account if you want to have a look at the provenance or explore it in a little bit more detail. Reassuring, I think, is probably the word to use, and we're going to need all the reassurance we can find in the coming days. 11:11 is the time. A few of you pointing out, because you're clever like that some of the trucks, depending on how long this delay is, they won't actually be compliant with the arrangements that will kick in on the 1st of January. So I think, and I think I saw a Conservative MP joining in on this morning, because as is always the case with Sadiq Khan, inexplicably, all the people who insist that anybody here with foreign heritage should integrate more, Sadiq Khan, despite having been elected mayor of our capital city, continues for some reason to annoy people who insist that people with antecedents from overseas should integrate more. I don't get it myself. I'm sure there's a reason. But he's calling, obviously, for an extension to the Brexit transition period. But I thought I'd, what's the word I want? Leaven that with this from the Conservative MP for North Dorset, Simon Hoare, who says, with worsening COVID situation and time of year, I'd really like to see the clock temporarily stopped on Brexit talks. There's no parliamentary time to scrutinise and agree a deal, and the daily clarity of the dangers to our already pressured economy of no deal is alarming. It's time for maturity, although, of course, he did campaign as a Conservative MP on the Get Brexit Done bandwagon, which was underpinned throughout by the no deal is better than a bad deal argument. But I mean it. You know, when people are ready to start climbing down, we have to be here to catch them and comfort them even. 13 minutes after 11 is the time. I've got Gary on the line, who's the chairman of New Covent Garden Market. So I'll come to him first after the 15:15 break. Can you make sure Gary's all right with that? Because he's put in a shift this morning. He'll be shattered. Before that, I'll talk to Al, who's in Midhurst, and after Gary, I could talk to you if you want. 0345 60 60973 is the number that you need. Al, what can you tell us?
Hi there, James. It's a real pleasure to be on the show, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing to highlight the issues. It's about carnets.
Yes.
I'm a freelance photographer, and the majority of my work has been in the EU, which essentially means that with all the equipment that we travel with, very expensive commercial stuff, we don't have to do a carnet. However, if we go to other parts of the world, we have to do a carnet, and the last one I did was over 600 quid. If you do that every time, or if I had to do that every time, following a no deal, it would put me out of business, because it would leave me with one of two options. Either I'd have to charge clients that sort of extra fee on top, or they would probably just go and find someone local and save themselves the hassle of having to...
We're back to the inviolability of the four freedoms. I hesitate to ask you this, but how confident are you, or indeed what sort of deal would you need to stay standing still, as it were, to carry on as you are? Because I've got a horrible feeling that it's not that straightforward. Because carnets are, the only way you swerve them is by being in a customs union, surely, and there's no prospect of that at all.
Yeah, I don't know,
by the way, I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, myself and other people who are in sort of similar positions that have fairly small margins in their business as far as possible. The reason that the carnets exist is because essentially you're sort of travelling with thousands of pounds worth, possibly tens of thousands of pounds worth of equipment, and they don't want you to sell it in the countries. So
you've got to prove that you're bringing it back across each border.
It has to be signed out and signed back in, and it's a very lengthy, laborious process. In fact, I hate doing it. It means that you have to get to sort of airports hours early. But most people in my shoes, we try as far as possible not to do it. Even when we're going to countries where we should.
Right.
In some cases, you can get away with it, but with countries that are more sort of switched on.
I understand. Because it's red tape, isn't it, in the simplest sense? And the idea of trying to avoid red tape is as old as red tape itself, and this is the bit where I have the unhappy duty of reminding you that we were all promised that leaving the European Union would reduce red tape, but everybody knew what they were voting for. Never forget that. Keith's been in touch from Folkestone, who was on earlier, so the Maritime connection was established. I haven't double-checked this, but I can't double-check all texts coming in. It tallies with what Kieran told us 4 years ago. Your caller there will have to get a carnet, deal or no deal. 700 quid is the current rate, standard rate. All technical equipment required for work requires a temporary import, which is a carnet. So builders doing work on holiday homes, etc., and in our caller's case, Al, a photographer taking his expensive kit into a European Union country and then proving that he's taking it out again, hasn't sort of flogged it in contravention of customs requirements. So, it's all there, isn't it, now? It's all there. Project Fear is Project Here. And I'll read you this one. A few of you think I should read out the text coming in from the sort of lunatic fringes. I don't know. Some of your reasons for wanting me to aren't completely spurious, but I will have a little look at some of the other ways of opening these conversations and opening these stories. The road haulage one is obviously huge at the moment, but how is it now? So we lobbed the rock into the middle of the pond last night or yesterday. This is particularly the closure of France to British business, to British lorries. But of course, this collision of COVID-19, the virulent new strain, and the failure to secure any deal so far on Brexit is now gathering pace. So if we see that as the rock that was lobbed into the pond, then I want you to describe the ripples you can see or feel. Gary, I mentioned earlier, is the chairman of the new Covent Garden Market. Thanks for staying on the line, mate. I've already spoken to our mutual friend this morning because Mrs. O'Brien's rather worried about her pomegranates, but you've got bigger fish to fry, if that's not a horribly mixed metaphor. What's going on?
Well, it's good morning, James. So it's obviously hard to say where we start from.
Yeah.
As you said earlier on, I had a very long night last night. I went into work about 10 p.m. Following the dramatic news that there would be no produce flowing through what Dominic Raab didn't know was quite a busy route.
Yeah.
And we are, the wholesale, not only New Covent Garden, but the other London markets and obviously nationwide wholesale markets, we are at the coalface, we're at the forefront. Now, all of a sudden, there is an immediate shortage. I don't want to panic people, but there is an immediate shortage of things that people want at Christmas. So, your soft citrus, your berries, etc., and obviously salad items will follow very shortly.
How shortly? Because Sainsbury's, you'll know, have put out a similar warning, because whether you're a small boutique greengrocer or whether you're a massive supermarket, supply chains will be largely the same. So, at what point may I not find soft citrus or salad leaves in the shops?
I think that what happens is, obviously I'm not here to defend supermarkets, but their programs would have been set months ago, 6 months, a year ago, and what they're now finding is not through their own logistical planning, but by action taken by the French government,
yes, of course,
that their produce won't flow through. The wholesale markets and the small independent trades, like your friend this morning, like me, we don't operate like that. So we don't set programs, especially now that when the hospitality industry is open, obviously and you're serving groups of restaurants, then you have to give them prefix prices so they know what to put on their menus for a period of time. But with that being shut since, basically closed since February of this year, we've had little pockets open here and there and take away in a week you can open, etc. But generally speaking, we don't work on a 3 month, 6 month, 9 month process. We work on an hourly process. So the produce that I was expecting last night from Spain, I bought on Thursday.
Right.
Now,
did that arrive last night?
So the funny thing was, one lorry got in early because what they'd done, they put 2 drivers on it, so they didn't have to stop anywhere. He managed to get through, but out of the 1 lorry that I did receive last night, 3 lorries didn't.
Right. And what happens to him now? Because he's got to go back empty, does he? And he can't get out of Dover.
That chap now will be sitting in a queue. Obviously, what I believe that particular driver done, he decided to do UK work, because what a lot of the UK drivers are trying to do now is just find UK work.
Of course, but there's going to be a lot of snouts in that trough, isn't there, Sharpish?
Well, and the European drivers don't want to come over here.
No, of course
you
not.
can understand that. So
because they can't get home as things stand. It's not complicated, is it? None of us would fancy that job.
It's horrific. Obviously. We're being led by a man who, as you said, has got himself into a corner and he don't get out of. Now, there are many of us that believe that the French are doing this. They've upped the ante, not because of the virus. Who knows? But
all I'd say on that one, Gary, is that the list of countries that have banned entry from the UK is a hell of a lot longer than France. It's up to 20 from where I'm sitting at the moment.
Yeah, so you're far more informed than me, and obviously, I've been working all night, and I take things very personal.
Of course you do.
But what I would say is that if we get into a principal battle with the French, which our Prime Minister seems to want to do, we'll lose.
Yeah.
Because they will not. And if you started off by saying, fish, it's as everybody knows, it's 0.1% of our GDP.
Yeah.
It's become ridiculous. We're fighting over pennies when actually we should be looking after our pounds. We've got a hospitality industry in this country that has systematically been destroyed by this incompetent government. I mean, there's been nearly 500,000 signatures to have a hospitality minister. But again, that's not going to happen. And, you talk about the supermarkets, and obviously we had the thing the other day where Sainsbury's laid off something like 7,000 jobs where they incorporated Argos.
Yeah.
That's a shame. But that was already in their planning. What isn't planned is the hundreds, thousands of small businesses with 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 employees that are closing at a rate that has never been seen before. And I doubt very much whether they'll ever open.
And we're still in furlough. So, come the end of April, goodness knows what's going to happen.
Well, if you talk about New Covent Garden, I mean, you've got New Covent Garden market, which turns over £650 million a year, is now down to trading at something like 40% of its capacity.
Already?
From February, March. Now, if you then look at the 2,500 people that are employed directly on site, that's been reduced by a third. Yeah, they're on furlough. But these companies that are reliant on the pubs, the restaurants, reopening, what are they going to do? And now you've got this problem. And, just changing the subject very quickly.
Yeah, go on.
We have just we've just achieved the unachievable in New Covent Garden. You have been very supportive of us trying to get this settlement with the government to build a market that will work for London. And only 3 weeks ago, I signed that settlement agreement.
I saw that.
I'm not quite sure how much help your programme give us.
Well, we'll do. We'll, in the spirit of gobs on sticks, I'll claim about 80% of the credit, if that's all right with you.
In that case, what you've got to now do then is get this government to realise that if we don't get this hospitality business back into place, we get no help whatsoever. We're banging in trouble.
You're not going to have any customers for the produce that you're providing. Do you want the good news, Gary?
That'd be fantastic.
John Redwood thinks we can grow our own.
Well, I nearly said he's a prat, but I can't say it on the radio.
It's a bit late now. Gary Marshall, chairman of the New Covent Garden Tenants Association, and like our Michelin-starred chef and our international courier, somebody who knows what he's talking about because he's living it. Obviously, you could go to Jacob Rees-Mogg and ask for the reasons why these people who actually do this for a living are wrong, and him and Andrea Leadsom are right. But I'm hoping that by now you've probably realised that might not be the wisest path. Mime Incorrigible points out that if only the likes of Kieran, who does this for a living, the chief executive of the Road Haulage Association, the chairman of the Tenants Association at New Covent Garden Fruit and Veg Market, if only they'd followed Jacob Rees-Mogg's advice and just used their common sense, then obviously everything would have been just dandy. So it's amazing that we arranged in advance to speak to the Road Haulage Association, but the Michelin-starred chef, the chair of the Covent Garden Tenants, and the doyen of international couriers are all ringing in because, like you, they listen, you see. And it's been a lonely furrow at times over the last few years, not in the context of audience numbers, but in the context of media allies, you could say. But, eventually the facts will always prevail over the feeling. So horrible though it is to see all of this unfolding, at least regular listeners to this programme will be less shocked than everybody else. Does that count? I think it should, actually. Forewarned is forearmed. Couple of phone lines free if you're quick. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. We can broaden it a little now beyond the direct. These could be the slightly later ripples. So if the collision of COVID and Brexit yesterday, with the announcements that the French ports were closing, with that collision, see that as a rock that's been lobbed into the pond, and I want to know which ripples are reaching you. 0345 6060973. Lou's in Stoke. Lou, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, hi, James. Okay, sorry. You were talking about supermarkets.
Yes.
And the impacts already seen on them. So this morning I nipped to Aldi.
Right.
We were due to go to Wales for Christmas, so on Saturday I did a very minimal, half a bottle of milk, type of shop.
Yeah.
So I went there this morning to collect some milk. I got there and it was absolute chaos.
Well, I mean, if you want people to panic buy, the best thing you can do is tell them not to panic buy, I suggest, isn't
exactly.
it? I mean, I don't know what else you can do in these circumstances because, is it irresponsible to listen to Gary there, who's your top man down at Covent Garden, and his warnings will make other people rush out and stock up on stuff, but he's telling you the truth about reality. It's a tough one, actually, Lou. Did you sharpen your elbows before you went into the supermarket?
I hate it anyway at the minute. I work within the NHS in auxiliary services, and to be honest with you, I dislike going shopping at the best of times at the minute because people are just
irresponsible.
Everybody's very selfish, I suppose.
The front page of the Daily Telegraph, how long ago was it that they were warning us we were going to get the sack if we didn't go back to work? People thumping desks, banging on about how people had to get back to work, and this is on them. Yeah. This is all down to them. And then the masks, these flipping mask skeptics, still wanging on about how it's an infringement of their civil liberties and their every single person I've spoken who works for the NHS is in no doubt at all about the gravity of the situation. But hey-ho, on we go.
Definitely.
It's nuts, isn't it? So did you get your shopping? That's the main thing.
I got my milk, I got my milk.
So you're not going to... Can you go to Wales still? Because can you still go... No. So what are you going to do?
We're going to stay at home, but I'll be honest with you, I'm slightly relieved.
Yeah.
So I was terrified that my father-in-law's had pneumonia a couple of times in the last 2 years, and both times ended up ventilated. So actually, having that decision taken out of my heart and put into my head means that I am feeling a little bit more.
That was one of the really, really interesting things to emerge when we first started talking about the Christmas calamity, was the fact that people wanted the government to put the rules in place, because otherwise there was, I mean, it would be too strong to call it emotional blackmail, but you've put it best, because I want to see my mum, and if I'm allowed to, I probably will. But I wish I wasn't allowed to. It's an odd way of putting it, but that's what you're describing, isn't it? I'm exactly the same.
Definitely. I think having that guidance there when it was a little bit washy, have a Christmas but don't have a Christmas.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, your heart overrules then. But the second they say, well, actually, no, you cannot now do this, your brain says, brilliant, now I can justify that.
That's it. And there's no sort of negativity involved or resentments, and even sort of families where the decision of which three households would get into the bubble at the half-price Christmas, the half-sized Christmas. Well, that's the problem, actually. Lou, do take care. That's what really hacked me off when they made the announcement on Friday. Was the Christmas announcement, wasn't it? Was it Friday or Saturday? It's so hard to keep up. But they did it after everybody had already made their plans. So you've got the transport plans. People bought their tickets. The government, I think, is going to have to step in and refund some of those, because a lot of the small print on your railway tickets and your coach tickets will tell you that if you get the cheaper prices, you're not entitled to any refunds or reschedules. So they did that. So people had made their transport arrangements. They bought their food. Most people. First time ever that the bloke who forgot to buy a turkey has ended up coming out on top. And yes, that was me. So the food has been bought. The fridges and the freezers are full. You can still eat a lot of it. You can still not. That's why Gary and Sainsbury's have warned about the salad leaves and the soft citrus, the stuff that simply can't be stored beyond a relatively short shelf life, and it can't be frozen either. in a lot of cases. But that's what really hacked me off. Because once again, you are conscious of the fact that if you've got a few quid, you're going to be hit a lot less hard than if you haven't, if you've spent your Christmas budget already. It's not an option to spend it again. And it turns out you're not going to be able to eat half of the food that you've bought. So you've got the transport, you've got the food, but you've also got all the family dynamics that they've inflamed and made worse. So bad enough, of course, that families are still fighting about Brexit, although I suspect that is going to calm down a lot in the coming months, where everybody ends up on the same side. It's just a question of who you're going to blame for the mess, the people who flogged it to you or some sundry other scapegoat. Probably blame it on Meghan Markle in some quarters. But the family dynamics, you know, the decisions that had already been made. You've fallen out with your brother-in-law because he didn't want to come and he was allowed to, or you've broken your mother's heart because you decided to go to the in-laws, whereas normally you'd have seen both of them. Or do you see what I mean? All of that. And we've been incredibly lucky on that front, on a personal level, but I still didn't pull the final piece out of the Kaplunk game until it was announced. And so now we're where we wanted to be, which is seeing nobody, because that seems to be the safest thing to do. And as my wise mum said, I know he said old then, she'd have killed me. As my wise mum said right at the start of the Christmas conversation, what is the point, son, of taking any risks at all when the finish line, thanks to the vaccines, is now in sight? Ted's in Henley on Thames. Ted, what can you tell us?
Morning, James. How
Hello,
are you?
Ted. Very well. What's on your mind?
So just going back to your earlier caller when he was talking about...
Now, I recognise your accent. You have 2 or 3 restaurants in the Henley area.
That's correct, sir.
Carry on, sir.
So your earlier gentleman was saying on a call about the hospitality industry needing a minister.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more. I think, but it also highlights...
Well, that's the good news. You want the bad news? It'd have to be chosen from the current crop of senior Conservatives, Ted.
Yeah, but only for the next 3 years. And I think that it highlights a bigger problem within hospitality is that we don't speak with a unified voice. We are the worst at lobbying as an industry. The supermarkets have themselves all lined up. They're geared up. They know what they have a unified vision. No matter they're competitive on the high street, but in the vision of what they want from the government, they speak with one voice. As in the hospitality industry, we're coming at it from every different angle. And once you're divided, you lose.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I unintentionally, of course, that's also a very powerful paean to the power of trade unions. But we'll jump off that bridge when we come to it. How would it be different? How just paint a picture for me of what it would look like if you did have a really cohesive, unified lobby is the word I want, I think.
I think we could agree on what it is the government could do to help the industry. Because although we've been we've received quite a few handouts and helpouts from the government, at the end of the day, this industry is on its knees like I've never seen it in my life.
No, of course.
And I don't see it getting any better in the foreseeable future. I mean, at the moment, between the tiers and between Brexit and between supply chains, and I mean, really, you sit at the moment and you can't plan for this evening service, let alone tomorrow's service, let alone next week.
I know. I know.
It is a complete and utter mess, and you know something, and I think...
And then you've got all the ones...
It's hope that kills you.
It is. Go on. Because you've got all the people who are chucking stuff away. So I've just mentioned a moment ago it happening on a domestic level. People who've stocked up and now found out they can't have their family Christmas are going to have to freeze what they can, give stuff. But pints and pints and pints being pulled down drains when the Tier 4 announcements were made.
And in the Tier 4 announcements, not just the guys who are in there, I really feel for them. I've got 2 pubs that are on Tier 2s, but they're surrounded by Tier 4.
Oh, wow.
So the impact on us has been massive, but we can't close. We're sitting in some form of purgatory where you think Tier 2, we're allowed to operate under the restrictions, but most of your client base comes from Tier 4, so they're abiding by the law and not coming.
Yes.
So
yes, of course. Oh, Lord above. So come June, furlough's over, vaccine is in circulation, we can begin to take baby steps back towards whatever the new normal will be. I mean, the challenge government faces is, of course, like spinning plates. They have to prioritise. They can't keep everybody happy all of the time. What does your sector need to see first?
I think, honestly, going forward, I think my event horizon is sort of the beginning of May, I think, is what we need to aim to be surviving to, and hopefully things can start ticking up from there. Mother's Day in April will help, Easter, things like that. We start aiming towards that. What we need is the VAT cut to remain in place. We need the business rates to stay where they are at zero, and those are just the starting list of a wish list that could go on. But it's genuinely going to come down to this. Makes obviously common sense. It's going to come down to how quickly people return to normal. What is the new normal? There's going to be a lot of pubs that aren't going to be trading by then. If you manage to survive and people go back to normal, maybe life will be a little easier.
And then what happens commercially? Because, forgive my ignorance, but if a pub goes under, what is the likelihood of it reopening as a pub, as opposed to somebody turning it into flats, for example?
I think it depends on...
Yes, I know, but give me a generalisation, if you can. You don't have to. It may be a really stupid question.
I think if pubcos are, which own the vast majority of pubs in this country, look at it and go, we can't find a tenant and we're not going to find anyone to rent this place, they'll start looking at alternative uses for the land. That's just it's business sense. What else are they going to do? But if a pub's gone down and the tenant isn't coming back in, most of the pubcos will go out on the search for a new tenant to run that business.
Yes.
And we're always there.
No, well, there will always be someone ready to put their shoulder to the wheel, someone like you, Ted. And that is entrepreneurial flair, if you like, or whatever else you want to call it. So that's what I mean when I keep saying that we haven't voted to leave the 21st century. We will muddle through. Things will get better and bad things will improve. But it is important to remember throughout that we are still governed by men who told us in 2016 that voting to leave the European Union would make everything better. And how long was it before we started taking calls from people who knew that actually it was all going to make everything worse, but that's what they wanted all along? Because I can't do the F word anymore. Because fish. And I have to issue an apology. I hate it when this happens. It turns out that new blue passport won't actually let you swerve all the delays and all the problems getting out of the UK. Even if you had a neon pink passport with Nigel Farage's face embossed on the back of it, you would still currently be banned from visiting about 20 countries because of the virus. And, of course, come January the 1st, when we cease, as things stand, we cease to enjoy the protections of our quasi-membership that's held in place until the end of the so-called transition period. Come January the 1st, that blue passport becomes about as powerful as a Mongolian one on the world stage. But that's what you voted for. Please don't patronise people by suggesting that they didn't know what they voted for, OK? 03456... Actually, I'm full of phones. I'll give you the number when I've got a spare line. Quick text. James, not only were the fridges full, but Johnson waited until closing time on the biggest shopping day of the year so that folk would have been out to buy Christmas presents. Cynical, but I can't help feeling that having gone from Tier 2 on Monday to Tier 3 on Wednesday and then Tier 4 on Saturday, it seems tactically planned. Either that or Boris has just left it all to the last minute with his head in the sand as he didn't want to be the Grinch that cancelled Christmas. It would have been far kinder not to tempt folk by the promise of a Christmas he could never deliver. If you're contemplating conspiracy, be sure to remember incompetence is the best advice I can give you, Fiona. There's no earthly way this was planned because the man in charge is incapable of planning his way out of a wet paper bag. And what he does is delay and delay and delay and delay and delay. If you sort of didn't have an education as privileged as mine, or actually, I think everyone who went to university knows what an essay crisis is, right? It's not a public school thing. That's what he is. He's an essay crisis prime minister. So he leaves absolutely everything until the last possible minute. I read a brilliant piece this week, and it may have been by Raphael Baer, and it explained how actually by leaving everything until the last possible minute, you make the decision easier because you've removed all the other options that would have been in play had you had the wit or the wisdom to make a decision earlier. So it coming down to this thin deal or no deal is because Johnson failed to deliver or understand the importance of nuance and other variables and things that might have gone differently. The Christmas thing, until the last possible minute where the choice is either call it off or don't. And he had to call it off. The decision was taken for him by the speed at which this new strain is spreading across the southeast. And then, of course, the other bit that he does is he makes announcements that are designed simply to make you like him. So that's why he announced the 5-day hiatus over Christmas in the first place, even though it was hard to find a single scientist who thought it was anything but diabolical. Speaking of experts, Dmitry Grozubinski has been steering us through some of the trade-related issues. He's currently a visiting professor at the University of Strathclyde, also the founder of Explain Trade, which does exactly what it says on the tin. Where do you want to start, Dmitry?
Well, I guess where I'd like to start is by expressing kind of solidarity and sympathy for the truck drivers, the couriers, the restaurateurs that are going through absolute hell. They were in for a really tough December and Q1 next year as it was, and I honestly can't even imagine what it's like to be in their shoes right now.
Because it's the certainty, it's the absolute absence of certainty. Even if they were certain it was going to be rubbish, that would arguably be better than this continuing confusion and obfuscation.
Exactly. And also, it's not enough to know it's going to be rubbish. You need to understand in exactly what ways it will be rubbish so that you can steer your rubbish scow down that river.
Thank you for mixing my analogies for me. It's normal. I'd normally be relied upon to do it myself. So talk us through what is possible and what is not possible now. I know you were writing as long ago as April about the blindingly obvious necessity in any vaguely normal circumstance to have an extension on the end of the transition period. You know better than I do. We are not living in vaguely normal circumstances. Has that ship sailed completely, or could we still go back to the European Union negotiators and ask if we can have a little extension after all?
So you certainly can't go back and ask for the same kind of extension using the same legal mechanism as you could have up until July this year.
Because they couldn't have said no, just to clarify my own comrades, they couldn't have said no up until July of this year if we'd asked for it. They could have, but every indication we had, including from the highest levels, was they were like, yes, sure. At that time, an extension, they were open to it, they were warm to it, they thought it was sensible. At this point, you not only have to overcome them wanting to do it, which is not an easy lift, but then I suppose the legal logistics of them being able to do it. Because an extension of transition in June would have been effectively an extension of the UK's membership for trade terms that was ongoing. The UK is no longer in the European Union. And the legal mechanism, Article 50, which is what allowed this transition period, that door has closed. We would be asking the European Union to punch another hole in the wall in order to let the UK walk through and maintain this transition. It's not completely impossible, and I'm not an EU lawyer, but it's such a huge ask, and there are so many details and questions about how that would work that would need to be negotiated in the next, 11 days. Yes. That it's just a monstrously difficult lift now. And the political difficulty of selling it here when the Prime Minister was propelled to power on the back of the Get Brexit Done nonsense, of course, is where we move into the nuance, the subtleties of it, rather than the stuff that is actually written down and can be unpicked by human brains. Is it then, because I said on Friday that I thought by today we'd probably know one way or the other, but I've said that a few times before. Is it right up until midnight on the 31st that Rabbit could appear from hat? Or would you write your own deadline a little earlier than that?
I mean, they're going to keep kicking the can down the road as long as they can, because the leaders on both sides really don't want to be the first ones to go, well, right, that's it then, isn't it? With that said, it's the closer you push it to midnight on the 31st, firstly, the more uncertainty there is for business. So at this point, God, at some point you hit diminishing returns on chaos, surely.
Yes.
But more kind of concretely, the less certainty they have and the more difficult it is for the two sides to manage those legal logistics of actually being like, okay, we have a deal that was signed in the room. Now we need the European Council to sign off on it, and now we need to somehow negotiate what happens with that being applied provisionally before the European Parliament gets a look at it. And it's sort of like these things are already incredibly legally difficult and procedurally difficult. And every day you push closer to December 31st, they get even harder. Not impossible, just harder. And when something is hard, that is more things that can go wrong.
You know what my last question is going to be. Give us the odds on any deal if you want. You don't have to.
So I've traditionally been in the optimist camp, saying 60-40.
Don't you dare. Go to 52-48. That's not allowed.
What? Do you have some sort of negative associations with that number? No, James. Honestly, at this point, in terms of getting a deal done,
yes.
I still honestly, in my heart of heart, believe it's kind of 60-40, 55-45, what have you, just because it would be so stupid not to get it. Yeah. And the disputes, the remaining things on the table are so economically meaningless that it would be insane not to do it. But my concern, as you know, is that you could get a deal tomorrow. It would make January a little bit easier, but the problems are just so much bigger and so unrelated to the deal.
And still, of course, not understood. A couple of texts have come in. I think they're both for you. This one says, I've just switched on. Is that Tim Minchin on the line? That's from Stephen in Milton Keynes. And this is from James in Merthyr, who says, we don't care, moron. Have a great day, remaining idiot. The gammon have beaten the soy middle-class fools. Although, on reflection, that one may have been meant for me, Dimitri.
I feel like we're both soy middle-class fools, James.
I think you're probably right.
And Tim Minchin is far more talented than I.
Well, we're grateful for you nonetheless, Dimitri Grozubinski, currently a visiting professor at the University of Strathclyde and also the founder of Explain Trade and an executive director of the Geneva Trade Platform. But obviously, if you want to really understand international trade, don't speak to international trade experts. Speak to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Well, very much a moving story, this, but the pound and the FTSE 100 have both fallen today as those European borders are closed to the UK. Rolls-Royce has fallen 10%, but and the pound against the dollar, we're looking at about $1.32 to the pound now. But as I say, almost as soon as I've said those words out loud, the situation may have changed. Down to 132. It was up to 136 when it looked as if a deal would be struck in the coming days. And I think we should all derive a little bit of comfort from Dimitri's optimism there. So still thinks it is more likely to happen than not. But of course, as I think everybody is now waking up to, a thin deal is better than no deal. Any deal is better than no deal, but there was never any deal available, really, that was going to be anything other than a whole world of pain. But please don't patronise people by suggesting that they didn't know what they were voting for. 6 minutes after 12. And while we're speaking of that, I was just looking at I was trying to look at the possible reasons why we're in such a mess now. And, you know, compared to other countries, I don't think we're the worst. Brazil's worse than us, not just looking at the numbers, but the political management as well. I wouldn't swap Boris Johnson for Donald Trump or Bolsonaro, all right? I can't quite believe that in the space of 4.5 years, our country has gone from, just narrowly avoiding chaos with Ed Miliband. And now in all honesty, and you know that this is a straight up, honest comment. No comedy intended here. No sort of snide subtext. I wouldn't swap Boris Johnson for Donald Trump or Bolsonaro. That's the nicest thing I can say about him and his leadership in 2020. Well, I wouldn't swap him for Donald Trump. Incredible. And I'm sort of looking at I'm always very conscious of the appalling damage that right-wing media does to the national interest and indeed the lives of its own readers. That ability to persuade people to act against their own interests is at the heart of all inequalities, really, in a democratic society. So, and Brexit overshadowing it or casting a shadow over it all. Would it be unreasonable of me to suggest that every single person you've encountered who was either banging the drum about the importance of people going back to their workplaces and either failing or pretending to understand that people have been working at home throughout 2020. So the very phrase back to work was bogus. So you've got people who were punting that either deliberate or accidental nonsense, that we've all got to get back to the workplace to keep sandwich shops open. So that would be point one. Similarly, people who were absolutely convinced that we had to get all the children back into school as quickly as possible because, having spent 10 years cheerleading for austerity, they suddenly discovered concern for poor children. So we could put that in as strand two, could we? So I haven't followed the mad end of the media as closely as perhaps I should have done, but back to the workplace, whether you want to or not. You see, you think perhaps you're exaggerating in retrospect, remembering, but the Telegraph had a front page saying, look, get back to work or lose your job. And almost certainly there'd have been people doing what I do for a living, blindly going along with whatever nonsense the Telegraph was touting that morning. Similarly with schools, I think the safest line on the schools was always, I don't know, let's trust the head teachers. But, of course, that suggestion would get you legal action or legal threats from Gavin Williamson. Head teachers should go away and shut up. So 4 strands of people I've identified. The back to the workplace, the send the kids back into the schools, then what you'd call the mask madness, people calling masks face nappies and muzzles, and again, not confined to the Green Ink Brigade, the kind of comment section of the Daily Mail, but actually in the comment section of national newspapers, grown men and women describing face masks as muzzles. And then the thing we touched on Friday and should probably have gone in on harder sooner, the absolute insanity of suggesting that we should protect vulnerable people and let everybody else go back to normal. That's almost like the culmination of the previous 3, isn't it? I mean, the idiocy of telling people to go back to the workplace, the irresponsibility of blindly suggesting that all schools would be fine and head teachers' concerns should be ignored, the scepticism surrounding masks and PPE, if you knit them all together, you end up with that argument, which I hadn't really explored further until Friday, that you should put all the vulnerable people in a box while everybody else goes back to work. Well, you knit those 4 things together. The argument that these people make was also that somehow all of the appointments and the operations that have been delayed or postponed because of COVID, they could all happen if the hospitals were completely overrun with COVID patients. So knit all that together and you get part of the reason why we're in the mess that we're in. And I don't think I've met anybody who was particularly pungent on the back to the workplace, particularly ignorant on the reopen all the schools, particularly stupid on the masks, and particularly, sort of weapons grade dangerous on the lockdown scepticism. I don't think I've met anybody in any of those categories who didn't also support Brexit. And looking at the British media, I don't think I've encountered anybody who has been this stupid about workplaces, schools, masks and lockdowns who wasn't also a massive cheerleader for Boris Johnson. And, while it's helpful to have it pointed out in glorious technicolor like this, that's why we're in the mess we're in. They're never going to turn around and say sorry. Boris Johnson has become the embodiment of Brexit. So people who've cheerled for him, in some cases for years, since he was mayor of London. And people who have cheerled for Brexit are psychologically, never mind professionally, incapable now of turning around to you and saying sorry. If they had a scintilla of integrity, they would have to. I'm really sorry that you turned on your television or you open your newspaper presuming that we know what we're talking about. Because when I encouraged you to back Brexit, to vote for Boris Johnson, and to be sceptical about the coronavirus measures being taken, I was doing you deep and lasting damage. You think they're ever going to turn around and say that? No, of course not. Too busy wanging on about Meghan Markle, probably, or the National Trust having the audacity to teach the history of historic houses in its own historic houses. And don't get me started on those poor little Millwall fans who were booing anti-racist endeavours. If anybody deserves our efforts and defence, it's racist football fans. And you wonder why we're in such a hole. Richard's in Kenilworth. Sorry, Richard, I didn't feel that one coming, but I never know when it's going to explode next. What would you like to say?
No worries, James. Thanks for taking my call. Basically, I run a third-party logistics company, so I have 50 customers. I ship out orders internationally and worldwide. You could say that I'm one of these contributors to the decline of the high street, but at the end of the day, what it actually represents is a change in people's online
That's how people do their shopping, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It's a change in online shopping patterns. Well, I mean, today we've walked into the fact that we ship orders all over the world, including Europe. We can't ship over 2,000 orders into Europe today, and that's let alone the impacts of what we've got to get ready for.
Where are they at the moment?
The orders in my warehouse, so we're waiting to go. We're not allowed to ship into our couriers because they're not accepting deliveries.
So, have you got any kit in the queues outside Dover?
No. Well, we will have. Yeah, there'll be orders out on the way there that won't get through as well.
But you've got 2,000 that you would have expected to dispatch today.
Yeah, that we can't. We're not sure when that's going to happen. Let alone the fact that at the end of the day, we've got to get ready for Brexit next week, and we still don't know what we're implementing. So, and this is for, 50 different customers who've got 50 different export arrangements and paperwork that has to be gone through. I mean, all it ends up doing is making us less competitive. This country is going to be less competitive.
How dare you?
This is the reality of where we are.
How dare you? What sort of a traitor are you? Have you not?
Rightly or wrongly, that's the truth. If you buy something in Europe, you don't have to pay the duties and VAT on it, okay? If we go no deal, you have to pay the additional duties and VAT. The same product will cost more to buy from the UK for a European than it will from a European, which makes it more expensive. It's basic economics. So, that's the reality of what we're going to face. It's going to, this is going to have impacts on my customers, which makes me less busy, which then has impacts on my staff. That's the bottom line of how this all pans out. And, we're on the front line of this. There's no, that people can phone in and say they know about trade deals and tariffs and etc. But they really don't understand what the reality is of implementing this amount of red tape that we're going to have to get through. That's, this is
when for you, I mean, that's long term, and some of the problems that you're facing today are short term, and they're linked to coronavirus. Everything's made worse by Brexit. Everything Brexit is made worse by coronavirus. Everything coronavirus is made worse by Brexit. But maybe you knew all along, but when did you fully grasp the sheer scale of what was going to happen to you and your business?
With coronavirus or Brexit?
No, Brexit.
With Brexit, I mean, we've known for us it was going to be a massive impact from the minute that the decision was made. The implementation of it is tricky at best.
Yes.
Because, I mean, for example, you go down the rabbit hole that is the government guidelines on, we're all being advertised to every day saying, get ready, go prepare. You go down the rabbit hole of how to ship small packets across borders, you end up getting directed to private companies like Royal Mail and Passport and saying, can you give me the answer? The government hasn't got a clue. The reality...
And some courier companies have stopped taking orders, we discovered last week.
Well, some courier companies are, they're trying to work out what to do in terms of the transition. That's the problem, because they still don't know the answer. Okay, because, we still haven't got a result. If we don't get an extension, it's almost criminal. It's criminally negligent almost. Honestly, that's the way I look at this. People should be held up in court for the impacts of what this is going to do to this country. There's no doubt, okay, that this is going to be... people are going to lose jobs because of the downturn that we're going to get. Now, you can say, Brexit is Brexit, we've had it. Yeah, that's fine, okay, but we need to know what we're going to do next, and we don't at the moment. And how can you do that in 10 days?
I don't know.
It's impossible.
Even I reel sometimes from what callers tell me, and it's been a vintage day today on the phones. But even, I've been banging this drum louder than anyone, but when people who are actually living it repeat back to me what I already understood, I still do a double take, Richard.
Yeah. I mean, let alone you go into the realms of, data transfer, me getting somebody's data from, simply an address data so I can send a package over to Europe. Technically, that's all up in the air.
And these are all businesses that you're facilitating exports
to individuals. So
but you're doing it for 50 companies to their customers outside this country. So that's correct. So that's British business. that was going to benefit from all of this. Richard, thank you, mate. You made me a little late for the break, although I've been smashing all sorts of records for going to the breaks late today. And strange, isn't it, really? And horrible in many ways. But we will sort of pull through together. I don't sort of go in for blitz spirit and things like that, because I think that nostalgia can be a very seductive and dishonest mistress. I follow a fascinating Twitter account, a photographer called Mark Davenant, who is also a great archivist of social reality, photography that was done to describe the experiences, the lives of people a million miles away from the mainstream. And it's a sobering thing, but we will, of course, strive to overcome any problems, even if they were entirely self-inflicted, and the people who inflicted them upon the rest of us are still in denial about having done it. That's just the nature of being sort of upbeat and well-adjusted and even ambitious or optimistic. We'll have to do it, even as all of those... I don't know where the anger goes next if it doesn't go to the people who've done this to us, who've done this to you. That's the question. Many people see the light, some sooner rather than later. Kenny's been in touch. Say, James, you have risen in my estimation to the level of Stephen Fry, Jeremy Clarkson and Bill Bailey, although I have no wish to see you dance anytime soon. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, Kenny. Thank you. Tony, meanwhile, is still... struggling, I think. Another laugh a minute in the O'Brien household this Christmas. What with you lecturing the wife, kids and the turkey over the evils of Brexit. Tony, mate, my 12-year-old understands it better than you do already. There'll be no lectures in my house, but hopefully eventually a wake-up call in yours. 23 minutes after 12 is the time. Grant is in Sheffield. Grant, what can you tell us?
Morning, James.
Hello.
Or afternoon now.
Indeed it is. Are you complaining about how long I've kept you waiting on the switchboard?
No. You've had way more qualified and more interesting people than me on for me to listen to.
You and me both. Carry on.
Well, we've only spoken once before, and it was March last year, and you were asking me if the deal was going to be done by the end of March. And yes. I said I don't think so.
Right, you win that one. End of March.
And
God.
I hope... You did say you'd never had a bad call from Sheffield at the time, so hopefully correct. I don't disabuse you of that.
Well, even if I did, I'd never admit it on the radio, because my mum would punish me for the rest of the day.
Well, exactly, yes. Yes.
Do you know, we should have been in Sheffield, just to digress briefly. It's a big birthday for Mum at the beginning of December, and I was going to take her on a tour of all her childhood haunts and stay in the finest hotel in the city, and it's just a little reminder of all the things that have gone out of the window during this crisis, and all the sort of changes that we've already made as we contemplate the lack of clarity on what's coming next. But anyway, enough about me and my mum. What do you want to say?
Well, there were a couple of things I called for, really. Yeah. I work in financial services.
Yes.
And I've got clients ringing me at the moment saying, and we're not talking about people that are millionaires, we're talking about people that are saving for retirement or saving for university fees, that kind of thing, buying a house, that kind of thing. It was saying to me, I want to buy a house in March. When do I sell?
Yeah.
When do I get the money?
Yeah.
I mean...
You wouldn't. I mean, who knows?
Well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, I can tell you what it's worth today. I can't tell you what it's going to do at the end of December.
No, and it might go up. I think there've been some, because people are sort of moving. The stamp duty thingy is negotiable. You know, that not guaranteed one way or the other. And then other stuff, and that's unbelievable. With 10 days to go, isn't it? Everything's still up in the air. It's
absolutely crazy. But the other thing I called you for, my stepson, and it won't take a huge amount to work out what it is, but he works for one of the largest online retailers.
Okay, carry on.
And
other large online retailers are available.
Absolutely. Not many as big as this one.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Go on.
But, one of the reasons I called is I've been listening earlier on, and I was laughing to myself in the car because it's bonkers.
Yeah.
But he was telling... I picked him up from work last week. He was telling me they were wrapping pallets to send back last week.
Yeah.
They've got goods on essentially sale or return from Europe.
Right.
That have obviously come in with no tariffs.
Yes.
And because they haven't been sold so far, they're trying to send them back before the 31st so they don't get a tariff imposed on them when they send them back to Belgium.
So they would either they send it back now, they sell it, or they send it back then.
And their estimation is they won't sell them.
So they want to send it back now, so they don't have to...
send it back now.
Oh, my God.
So they get it back into Europe before the 31st.
Yeah.
And given the size of this company, I can only imagine the number of trucks that are full of their stuff.
You know, you're probably not expecting William Shatner to make an appearance at this point in proceedings, Grant.
Well, you never know on your show, James.
Well, this is very true. This is very true. But I saw a tweet from William Shatner, Captain James Tiberius Kirk, a.k.a. And I didn't get it at the time. And he was simply explaining why they wouldn't be sending any merchandise to the UK for the foreseeable future. And I think it was the other end of this same reason. It was because it's going to cost him money to send stuff, or the tariffs that would be imposed on us when we're no longer a European Union country. I don't know where his warehouse is, but that was certainly what he had taken away from his business, was that they wouldn't be sending merchandise into the UK after we left the EU because of the A, confusion over what the new reality would be, and B, the inevitability of tariffs on it.
Well, these were white goods as well, so they're not...
I was thinking of buying a freezer this afternoon, actually, just in case.
Well, you get it in now, because I think there'll be... if you go down to Folkestone, there's a chance you might be able to pick one up.
You're giving them away in Folkestone.
But they were white goods, so they're not insignificant purchases, you know.
Clearly not.
And if there's 5% going on and going back, I mean, we're talking... hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds.
It is, and it's all there, and it's still not clear. So again, I don't know, I'm conscious always of having to acknowledge repeatedly that I am going to be better insulated from a lot of the financial impacts than many, many, many people are. But you've got to multiply everything, all of the stories we hear. Grant, take care of yourself, mate, and regards to your stepson who works for that mysterious organisation. But we you know, I don't know at what point you turn around and say, oh boy. And I don't know what fixing it looks like now. I mean, we all avoided chaos with Ed Miliband, but it's not really the time to point out that the rock who's currently leading the country was the only other choice from a hard place back in December of last year. But you know, we are where we are, as they like to say. 28 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I kind of trying desperately to think of something that we might be able to file under reasons to be cheerful or things. But the nearest thing, I mean, Brexit is going to good Brexit news is going to boil down to, and this has been clear for a long time, it's going to boil down to, well, things aren't quite as bad as some people thought they might be. That will be the win. The absolute best you can hope for. And you see this now with Liz Truss. I mean, almost turning ludicrous behaviour into performance art. She's singing from the rooftops every day about a new trade deal that she's signed. It's a photocopy of the deal we already had. So the biggest Brexit win achievable is everything is going to stay exactly the same as it was before. And the only other Brexit win available is, well, look, that's not quite as bad as some people warned it might be. At what point, if we had to put a date on it, and no, I don't know why my voice went up 6 octaves just then, but it's been a long year. If we had to put a date on it, when would you say roughly, and tweet me this, at Mr. James OB, give me the point at which they stopped claiming that anything was going to get better. I mean, obviously, if you're a massive racist and you think there's going to be fewer foreigners around, that's a win for you. Well done. We're here. Go you. But for everybody else, when was the point at which they stopped claiming, because I don't think they were pretending, I think some of them believed it, that things were going to get better. And after the latest news headlines, I have a clarification, thanks to Kirk, on that William Shatner issue, which I managed to get slightly backwards. So I'll give you the lowdown on that. The conclusion was the same, but the journey to get there took a few wrong turnings on my part. 12:30 is the time, and we will boldly go. And you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. 2 more shows together, and then the Christmas schedule will kick in, which usually involves Steve Allen broadcasting 24 hours a day while wearing tinsel, which is a sight to behold, I can tell you. I think, because he always leaves little treats around. I don't see him anything like as much as I would like to, but I think he's discovered new flavours of After Eights. I think that's got him written all over it. I keep finding little boxes of gin and tonic flavour After Eights and or strawberry flavour After Eights. Do you know, only yesterday I had an After Eight and I found myself thinking that truly is the taste of Christmas for me. And we've never had them in the house except at Christmas. I think if Mum and Dad were having what we used to call a dinner party, I think they might have had After Eights then, but there'd be none left. There's no way my sister and I would be allowed to have them before the dinner party, and then we'd come down the next morning in the days before dishwashers. And now I realise, looking back, that perhaps some wine had been taken by my parents and their friends. So the table would still be laden. You know, the big clear-up would happen the next morning. And we'd always go to... And the After Eights are the cruelest mistress when it comes to minty chocolates. Because if people put the envelopes back in the box, and you are an 8-year-old boy with his 6-year-old sister snaffling around for leftovers the next morning... It's like something out of Dickens, this... then that at first glance, before you pick it up, the box can look half full. It's almost as bad as the time my Auntie Christine ate all the smoked cheese. It was another annual treat we only ever got when the grown-ups had finished with it. So the After Eight is the one that promises so much and then often delivered so little when I was a kid. But these days, and Steve's going nuts for them. Alex is producing the show today, and he got some gin and tonic After Eights this morning. Steve Allen's the source, is he? We've established the source. It's all coming through Steve. They are, I'm told, incredible. Gin and tonic After Eights. Who'd have thought it? I was about to tell you that we've got 2 more shows together after this, and we should try and find some slightly more cheerful business to deal with. But there you go. We just stumbled accidentally into Steve Allen's gin and tonic After Eights, and everybody's feeling a little bit better about the world. 12:37 is the time. I cited William Shatner appropriately, but I described William Shatner's intervention incorrectly. It wasn't the tariffs that were the problem. It was the EU forcing companies outside Europe to register for and collect VAT, which already exists more or less for digital sales. So we are outside the EU as of January the 1st, ergo dealing with us will be different than it was previously. 12:38 is the time. Alex is in Watford. Alex, fill your boots.
Hello, James.
Hello, mate.
I was going to wish you happy Christmas, but I don't know what I can wish you for the new year. We'll have to wait and see.
I'll be happy just to still be here, Alex, I think, as things stand.
Tell me, James, didn't Harold Wilson say a week is a long time in politics? I mean, what are we worrying about? We've only got 11 days to go. That's no problem at all.
I'll have what you're on. Have you been at those gin and tonic After Eights again, have you?
They're lovely.
So I hear. I might try one after the show, if there's any left.
Look, help me through the wilderness. Dominic Cummings, what was that all about? What was that amateur dramatics about? He walked out number 10 with his box in his hand, walking down the road. Are you sure he's left number 10, the way Boris is acting?
Well, it shows that he didn't provide anything good or bad, would be the short conclusion, I guess, because I haven't really noticed any particular change in the quality of service since he slung his hook, have you?
No. And wasn't he in contempt of Parliament?
He was in contempt of Parliament, but then again, Boris Johnson prorogued the entire Parliament unlawfully and got Jacob Rees-Mogg to mislead the Queen. So, you know, it's a crowded field, Alex. It's a crowded field. But remember, everyone knew what they were voting for.
But Boris, he's playing a blinder, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, he called it out on Saturday, wasn't it?
Yes.
But after Parliament went into recess.
Yes.
Why on earth isn't Parliament being recalled today? Why aren't we discussing
Well, do we need
to?
to? But the only reason you need to discuss it, and listen, I could be wrong on this. It wouldn't be the first time, despite popular belief. The only reason I've seen to call Parliament back is because people are still... You have this ERG rump who are still sceptical about lockdowns and closing businesses. You know, do we really recall the entire Parliament just to continue indulging the people who've led the country to this precipice because they don't understand coronavirus any better than they understand the workings of the single market? I don't share that view necessarily.
But our Prime Minister announced to the world we'd lost control of the second virus.
Yes.
And surely.
Then we could get proper questions. I'd be happy with a really good press conference, not rather than necessarily recalling Parliament. But I might be missing something there, Alex. It wouldn't be the first time. Thank you, mate. Oh, oven ready deal, eh? James is in Lewisham. James, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. I'd just like to say that it seems a bit premature to blame what's happening around Dover on Project Fear coming true when we haven't actually left the single market and the customs union yet. So our trading relationship with the EU has not actually changed yet.
No, you're right.
So you were blaming it on you were saying this is Project Fear coming true.
No. I was talking to people like the Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association, the Chairman of the Tenants Association at Covent Garden Market, former trade negotiators about what's going to happen next. You've got the wrong end of the stick there, James.
Well, you did. No, you definitely. So
Brexit stockpiling has contributed to the queues because companies are so worried about what the trading arrangements will be come January that they've been trying to get more kit in, which is why Felixstowe, for example, has been almost impossible to berth that for the best part of a month. But you'll know that because you heard me explain it to you a month ago on this programme.
But how can we be sure?
Here you are, still talking.
Sorry?
Here you are, still talking.
I'm trying to say, how can we be sure that this is not like the stockpiling that happened before, at the beginning of the lockdown?
Yes, well, what you need to do is you need to stop reading John Redwood's tweets and Charles Moore's newspaper columns and listen to the Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association, James, and then your confusion will clear in a nanosecond.
Well, why don't we wait until we have actually left the single market and the customs union before we say that Project Fear came true?
Still talking.
Why don't we do that, James?
Because the Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association, who has to represent his interests and explain to customers what the future is likely to look like, is doing a very good job of explaining to his country what the future is likely to look like. So, okay, James, before you go, what date do you think we should start reporting reality?
Clearly there's going to be some disruption when we do leave, but we shouldn't say the whole.
Forgive me, I'm not interested in your opinions unless you're the Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association. I'm just wondering, in your strange little world, what day you think reality should be accurately reported on the radio.
I mean, if in 6
Thursday?
months' time there's 6 months.
6 months, okay. Well, I'll ring you back then. Have a great day. It's 12:43. Scott's in Barcelona.
Hi there, James. How are you?
I'm all right, Scott. My patience, I think, is a work of art at times like this. What would you like to say?
I have left the country. I have bitten the bullet. You know, the government.
Shouldn't you have waited? Shouldn't you have waited 6 months?
I couldn't afford to wait. If I didn't get into Spain, before the Brexit transition, I may have had no benefits. I don't know what I'm going to get now, but I've had to give up my job. I'm in the process of selling my house, and I fled on the Eurotunnel because I couldn't even get on a flight because I had COVID 2 weeks before.
Oh my days! So you're settling now in Barcelona.
I'm 3 days in and I don't speak a word of Spanish, but I'm here.
Well, I don't understand, Scott. I mean, what were you? A bit of a rich question coming from me, but what were you so worried about?
I spent 4 years listening to you, unfortunately.
So I hope you haven't moved to Spain solely on my say-so. There must be a slightly more personal perspective that informed the decision.
I did meet a Spanish lady about 3 years ago.
There we go.
Moving,
trying to blame it all on me. Honestly, you're just commitment phobic, and the final push over the line was the fears of what Brexit might mean for Great Britain.
I had never heard of Brexit until I started listening to a show about 4 years ago as a van driver, and I listened and listened and listened, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. And now we are here watching exactly what
Having listened for 4 years, can you think of anything I got wrong?
No, unfortunately not. No, I mean the only thing that we could have done different was to explain all the benefits of being in the union before we had a vote, but that wasn't on the agenda, unfortunately.
No, and everyone bears responsibility for that, I think.
What they've done if we were still part of the European Union, I think this is the first sort of salvo in the you've made your choice, you just need to live with it.
And those pesky French controlling their borders, you could have seen that coming. 12:45 is the time. Scott, hope to stay safe, learn the language, enjoy Barcelona.